The Vermont vehicle registration loophole has been closed. In a shocking turn of events, the Vermont vehicle registration loophole has been closed. Now, if you don't know what that means, don't worry. I lived in Vermont my entire life, and I had no idea this loophole existed until very recently. Basically, the way the guidelines were written for Vermont's vehicle registration policies was that anyone could register a vehicle in the state of Vermont. You did not need a Vermont driver's license or a Vermont address in order to do so. So anyone in the country could register a vehicle in Vermont, get Vermont state license plates for it and a certificate of registration, and then that vehicle could legally be driven in all 50 states. As for why this loophole exists, I don't know, but I have a few theories. First theory, this might have been a simple oversight. Vermonters tend to work differently. They may have taken at face value that only people in Vermont would actually want to register a vehicle in Vermont, and so it doesn't make sense for the law to state that explicitly. It is implied. Vermonters also tend to have a sense of pride for Vermont, so this may have been set up so that if a resident moves out of the state of Vermont, they can continue to register their vehicle in Vermont and have Vermont state plates. It may have also been so that all the people with vacation homes in Vermont can register their vehicles in Vermont if they choose, with the convenience of having the registration sticker sent to their main home instead of their vacation home. Whatever the reason, that's the way it was designed. So, really, it wasn't actually a loophole until people started abusing it. So, you could register your vehicle in Vermont regardless of where you live. But why would people want to do that? Let's get into it. The first time I saw this loophole being used was in the background of a Donut Media video. It was an old ambulance, and it had Vermont state plates, and it was in the background of this video that was filmed somewhere in California. I thought it was weird, and so I remembered that, and I looked into it a little bit further. Because of this loophole, Vermont had become somewhat of a mecca for automotive enthusiasts. Now, when you think of hotspots for car culture, I'm sure you think of California. Hot rods, lowriders, exotics. The dry climate of Southern California is perfect for the preservation of old cars. However, California has some of the toughest emissions and vehicle safety laws in the country. It is virtually illegal to modify your car in California. Not to mention problems with registering vehicles that aren't cars. My truck, for example, has a tandem rear axle. That would classify it in California and many other states as a commercial vehicle requiring a commercial driver's license. In a place like Illinois, you could register it as an RV. However, Illinois defines RVs in a very specific way. Basically, they need to have things like a stove, bed, and sink in order to qualify as an RV. Other states also have exorbitant registration fees as well, but that often cited reason is rarely a reason to go through the trouble of registering your car in Vermont. Actually, the main reason that car enthusiasts have been using this loophole is due to Vermont's title laws. If you don't already know, a title is a legal document that proves you are the owner of a vehicle. Most states require a title to register a vehicle, which is fine for new cars. However, the barn finds that you see all over YouTube, most often the title has been lost to time. You can also run into problems registering your vehicle in certain states if the previous owner died, if the vehicle is in poor condition, or if the vehicle has a branded title such as a flood title or salvage title. So many of these cars would be lost to the crusher in other states. Because of the difficulty in registering these vehicles, many of them would be lost to a crusher in other states. But in Vermont, none of these situations are an issue. In Vermont, commercial vehicles are determined based on gross weight rating, not number of axles. Also, RVs are exempt from all CDL requirements, and the only criteria for an RV is that it is not used for any commercial business. A semi-truck with a lowboy trailer can be an RV as long as you are not hauling anything for business. If you're really worried about it, you can always slap "not for hire" on the side, then everybody will know that it is a privately owned recreational vehicle that only transports your personal effects. Also, Vermont only issues titles to vehicles that are less than 15 years old. So you can register a vehicle older than 15 years old without a title. Perfect for that barn find, or that vehicle you picked up from a government surplus auction. Also, Vermont has no issues registering vehicles with branded titles, and the registration is not contingent on passing a safety inspection. In Vermont, you still have to get your vehicle inspected every year in order to legally drive it on the state roads. However, you don't have to have the vehicle inspected in order to register it, which means you can register a vehicle that is currently a work in progress with the plan to get it inspected later. Also, Vermont, generally having less bureaucratic red tape, makes it easier to apply for a replacement title if a title is required but not found. Lastly, Vermont has a special registration class for street rods. They are exempt from certain safety requirements, and there are many states out there where you wouldn't even be able to legally register these on the road. I knew all of those laws, but never really thought much of them. I took them for granted until I visited Texas, where the license is issued by a different entity than the vehicle registrations, and you have to get one before you can get the other, and then you have to get the car inspected before it can actually be registered, and you have to have a title for all vehicles, no matter how old they are, no matter how decrepit they are. That's a lot of hoops to jump through. These laws limit the ability of people to enjoy automotive hobbies the way they want to. So the ability to register vehicles in Vermont is a blessing. They have the freedom to buy, build, drive, and enjoy any vehicles they want. Another reason people tend to register their vehicles in Vermont that is often cited, but I find isn't much of a factor compared to the reasons I already discussed, is that the registration fees and sales tax in Vermont is cheaper than many other states. So it would be possible to save some money continuing to renew your registration in Vermont. However, a lot of people will use Vermont to set up a vehicle registration for whatever vehicle they want to register, and then they will transfer that registration, transfer that vehicle to their home state. So that is not really much of an issue. In Texas, for example, a registration certificate from another state is acceptable in lieu of a title. This means someone could pick up their barn find Hemi Plymouth Cuda, a very rare car that didn't come with a title, register it in Vermont, and then use that registration certificate to register their car in the home state of Texas. Texas is still getting their registration fees, and everything is happening legally, and this rare, beautiful car is saved from a scrapyard. Where's the harm in that? Well, like most good things, a few bad apples had to come in and ruin it. Because anyone could register any car in Vermont, and because new titles were easy to get, this loophole started to be abused to flip stolen cars. Normally, you can't do much with a stolen car. You can joyride it and crash it, or you can strip it and sell the parts. But without a title, you can't sell it or register it yourself. Unless you trick Vermont into registering it for you, getting a title from Vermont, and then you can just transfer the registration to whatever state you want and sell it in that state. Also, people started registering cars in Vermont and using them for crimes. All you needed was an alias and a cheap flop house, and you could register as many cars as you could find. You could use them to rob banks or run drugs, and they couldn't be traced back to you. but they'd still be technically registered, so you wouldn't run the risk of being pulled over like you would if you simply cold-plated the car. Police have license plate readers in their car, so they'll know if you cold-plate the car, but they wouldn't bat an eye if the registration shows as valid and the number on the plates match the make and model of the car that you're driving. Vermont's lax registration laws were also being used for title washing. Flood cars are known to have issues for many years, even after they've been removed from the flooded waters. So, states will brand a title of a car that's been in a flood so that future owners know what they are getting into when they purchase this car. Well, if the car is over 15 years old, what people were doing is they would buy these cars with the flood titles. They would register them in Vermont, claiming the title had been lost, and then they are able to get a clean Vermont title and then resell that car with very little trace of it being in a flood. Now, sometimes it could still show up on Carfax depending on how long ago the car was in the flood, but if everything was done very quickly, Carfax would not have a chance to catch up with the title. Because of these bad actors abusing the Vermont registration loophole, and partly because of other states complaining about the fact that they were missing out on all the revenue from people registering their cars in their state, Vermont decided to shut down the loophole. Out-of-staters can still register vehicles in Vermont, but they must meet two requirements. First, they have to have some legitimate connection to Vermont. I couldn't find out what qualifies this. Maybe it's owning or renting a place in Vermont, maybe it's having family here, being a former resident, conducting business here, or it could simply be enough to visit Vermont on vacation. I don't know. However, the second requirement is a little harder. You have to have a representative from your home state's DMV sign a paper saying that you are allowed to register cars in a different state. Also, the application will be reviewed based on the home state's laws. I can't be sure what this means, but it could mean that you wouldn't be able to register a vehicle in Vermont if that vehicle was not able to be registered in your home state. So no more 15-year title exemption laws, no more loose definition of recreational vehicles, no more of the benefits that you actually get by registering your vehicle in Vermont. If you currently register a vehicle in Vermont, don't worry, this change does not apply to you, it only affects new registrations. So you can continue to renew your existing registrations. However, I don't know whether registration transfers are affected. So if you want to transfer an existing registration to a new vehicle, just be aware of that, and you might have to call the DMV to ask. Now, what about the people who live in Vermont? Well, nothing is changing for you. If you have a Vermont address and a valid Vermont driver's license, all of the rules are remaining exactly the same. Which means, if you subscribe to my channel, you will continue to see my trucks, you will continue to see whatever odd project catches my eye next, and I can register it in Vermont without any issues. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button to see what I bring home next. What can you do? Well, you could rent a place in Vermont and move your official permanent residence to Vermont. With a Vermont residence and Vermont license, you can have as many Vermont registrations as you want. However, if your secondary residence is in Florida, that might be a bit problematic as Vermont licenses are no longer valid in the state of Florida, but that will be another video. That option also comes with some other problems. For example, if your primary residence is in Vermont, you would need to pay Vermont taxes unless you pay income tax in the state that you work in. So it can create some situations where you end up having to pay more in taxes than you would otherwise. The other option is to call your state's legislators and tell them how much you love the automotive hobby and how your state's current registration laws severely restrict your ability to enjoy this hobby that you love. And you can even include the fact that the state is losing revenue from all those vehicles that can't be sold or registered in the state. Who knows? Maybe if other states weren't so full of bureaucratic red tape, people wouldn't be flocking to Vermont to register their vehicles. That is all for this video. If the situation changes, I will update you. Let me know down in the comments what your least favorite motor vehicle law is, and while you're down there, if you made it this far in the video, you should subscribe because I am sure you will like my other videos. Thank you for watching.